Hi, my name is Sheryl Grossman, and I was born with a very rare Jewish genetic condition known as Bloom syndrome. I just turned 45, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. But where my brother and I grew up was a very sparse Jewish population, and we only had a Reform Jewish congregation. So I went to Sunday school and Hebrew school, and we went to services in a Reform congregation. So we were like one of 7 Jewish families in the public schools that we went to. And I think we were one of 3 families that kept kosher. And so it was, it was a little bit sparse. But I definitely had a good founding. But then I hit high school, and the rabbi was teaching the Hebrew high school class, and he decided he didn't want to teach me. And so he kicked me out. He said it had something to do with, what year in school I was in and all kinds of stuff that was a bald-faced lie. And we saw through that. But, my brother was 1 year prior to his bar mitzvah at that point. So we moved congregations much further away to a conservative congregation so that he could get his training. But there was nothing for me in Hebrew high school in the conservative movement at that time. So I was just sort of set adrift and floating around after this very horrible experience. And so I saw myself drifting away from Judaism because of this very bad experience that I had had. But then I ended up in college at a school with a very warm and welcoming Hillel at Washington University in St. Louis.
What kind of accommodations do you receive? And do you feel that you are regularly accommodated since then within the Jewish community?
So this is a sort of hard and fluid question also, because so what failed to happen as a kid were accommodations in the schooling. But as an adult, I didn't have that, right? There was no structure for Jewish learning. What I did have were people who were patient and willing to teach me what I had missed all my life. And they didn't treat me any differently than someone who was, say, converting to Judaism or whatever. They took the time and the effort to teach me what I wanted to know. So I'm not sure that it's really, it was a natural accommodation. It wasn't more than that. What I would say is most important is people's attitudes. Really, whatever barriers are in the way can be overcome by people's willingness to do it. And that's certainly what I have seen and what I have found.
Can you share a positive experience within the Jewish community where you felt fully accommodated for?
I can. I'm going to share a little bit more about that first experience for me. So I had become co-chair of the conservative minyan at Hillel for Washington University because of the way that I had been so fully included my freshman year. So sophomore year, I wanted to give that back to others. But the first Shabbat morning that I tried to do services, Hillel had a bunch of break-ins, just regular burglaries like in the neighborhood. And so they had decided to lock the door Friday night to Saturday morning. And they had forgotten to tell me, and they had forgotten to leave me a key. So I got there and I couldn't get us in. And I was looking in at our siddurim laid out, and the Torah scroll was laid out for us, and lunch was laid out for us in the other room, and I could see it, but I could not get us in. And so some of the older students said, we can still make minyan if we go to the modern Orthodox shul. It's only a 10-minute walk away. We could still make it in time. And they'll take us home for lunch. And I'm like, and they pulled me along, kicking and screaming. And I walked in, and I'd been in an Orthodox shul before, but I'd never really davened, prayed there before. I'd never really, been a part of a community. And anytime I walk in any space anywhere, because I'm 4'3" and about 48 pounds, people turn around and they stare. Like, it's like the deer in the headlights look, like, why are you here? Like, who are you? And that didn't happen here. Several years. I've been a board member, and I'm now the board chair for Yad HaChazakah, which is the Jewish Disability Empowerment Center out of New York. And we basically are a center for independent living that does disability justice work, disability civil rights work within the Orthodox Jewish community. We're based out of New York, but we serve, everyone. I would say the whole country, but really we've worked with people in Israel too. So like we work all over the world. And specifically, we're there to help Jews, Orthodox Jews with disabilities, understand that we don't have to be disabled people or Orthodox Jews. We're all of that together.
Do you have any like final thoughts or anything else you want to add?
Sure, I would. Actually, there's one question I think we sort of touched on, but I'd like to expand a little bit on, and that is sort of like the state of the Jewish world when it comes to disability rights and disability justice. And I think that we have some work to do. I think that we've come a very long way. Clearly, I have seen a lot of change over the years. But I think that we can do more, and I think that we're in a good position right now to do so. And so I would speak to communities, what can we do now? So if we do Sheryl, if we do classes, especially right now during COVID, everybody's putting them online. That's great, but are we putting on cart captioning? Are we including ASL interpreting? And that's why I said when I agreed to do these, I would only do it if we pre-record it and add those to it and put a transcript up with it. So those three things, I say to every rabbi, every teacher, when you do those things, please add those three things, because that allows a community that if we were in person, they might be right in front of you and may not need those accommodations if they're right in front of you, but if they're on screen, makes it that much harder. It might still need it in person, but you might not know that. So do it right from the beginning. Build that into your capacity when you do it. If you're sending out printed materials, have the capacity from the very beginning to do large print, to create your documents as a Word document as opposed to a PDF document so that screen readers can read it. Put in alt tags so that if you have graphics in there, it's described for a screen reader. Don't use PowerPoints, or if you use PowerPoints, make a Word version also and send it out at the exact same time. That way, if people need it, it's available and you're not calling out someone who may not have disclosed to you that they have a disability. Movements as a whole. So a lot of congregations specifically, and the Reform and the Conservative, and I've seen some in the renewal movements also, tend to have, especially when they're larger congregations, have like an access committee, which is great. I'm loving the fact that people are paying so much attention to this now. It's great. But when those committees end up doing a JDAIM event, or one day a month for a service for people who have sensory issues or are on the autism spectrum, that's not the everyday inclusion that we're talking about. So those things can feel great, but they're not making the change that we need.